Resurrection is the concept of a living being coming back to life after death. In a number of ancient religions, a dying and rising God is a deity which dies and resurrects. The death and resurrection of Jesus, an example of resurrection, is the central focus of Christianity. As a religious concept, it is used in two distinct respects: a belief in the resurrection of individual souls that is current and ongoing, or else a belief in a singular resurrection of the dead at the end of the world. The resurrection of the dead is a standard eschatological belief in the Abrahamic religions. Some believe the soul is the actual vehicle by which people are resurrected. Christian theological debate ensues with regard to what kind of resurrection is factual, either a spiritual resurrection with a spirit body into heaven, or a material resurrection with a restored human body. While most Christians believe Jesus' resurrection from the dead and ascension to heaven was in a material body, a very small minority believe it was spiritual. There are documented rare cases of the return to life of the clinically dead which are classified scientifically as examples of the Lazarus syndrome, a term originating from the biblical story of the resurrection of Lazarus. Etymology: resurrection, from the Latin noun resurrectio onus, for the verb regard, to make straight, rule, plus preposition sub, under, altered to subrego and contracted to surgard, surrexi, surrectim plus preposition re, again, thus literally a straightening from under again. Religion. Ancient religions in the Near East. The concept of resurrection is found in the writings of some ancient non-Abrahamic religions in the Middle East. A few extant Egyptian and Canaanite writings allude to dying and rising gods such as Osiris and Baal. Sir James Frazer in his book The Golden Bough relates to these dying and rising gods, but many of his examples, according to various scholars, distort the sources. Taking a more positive position, Trygve Mettinger argues in his recent book that the category of rise and return to life is significant for the following deities: Ugaritic Baal, Melkit, Adonis, Eshmun, Osiris and Dumuzi. Ancient Greek religion. In ancient Greek religion, a number of men and women were made physically immortal as they were resurrected from the dead. Asclepius was killed by Zeus, only to be resurrected and transformed into a major deity. Achilles, after being killed, was snatched from his funeral pyre by his divine mother Thetis and resurrected, brought to an immortal existence in either loose, Elysian plains of the islands of the blessed. Memnon, who was killed by Achilles, seems to have received a similar fate. Alcmene, Castor, Heracles, and Melichetes were also among the figures sometimes considered to have been resurrected to physical immortality. According to Herodotus's histories, the 7th century BC sage Aristaeus of Proconnesus was first found dead, after which his body disappeared from a locked room. Later he found not only to have been resurrected but to have gained immortality. Many other figures, like a great part of those who fought in the Trojan and Theban wars, Menelaus, and the historical pugilist Cleomedes of Astupalia, were also believed to have been made physically immortal, but without having died in the first place. Indeed, in Greek religion, immortality originally always included an eternal union of body and soul. The philosophical idea of an immortal soul was a later invention, which, although influential, never had a breakthrough in the Greek world, as may be witnessed even into the Christian era, not least by the complaints of various philosophers over popular beliefs. Traditional Greek believers maintained the conviction that certain individuals were resurrected from the dead and made physically immortal, and that, for the rest of us, we could only look forward to an existence as disembodied and dead souls. This traditional religious belief in physical immortality was generally denied by the Greek philosophers. Writing his lives of illustrious men in the 1st century CE, the Middle Platonic philosopher Plutarch's chapter on Romulus gave an account of the mysterious disappearance and subsequent deification of this first king of Rome. comparing it to traditional Greek beliefs such as the resurrection and physical immortalization of Alcmene and Aristeas the Proconnesian. For they say Aristeas died in a fuller's workshop, and his friends coming to look for him found his body vanished, and that some presently after, coming from abroad, said they met him travelling towards Croton. Plutarch openly scorned such beliefs held in traditional ancient Greek religion, writing, "Many such improbabilities do your fabulous writers relate, deifying creatures naturally mortal." The parallel between these traditional beliefs and the later resurrection of Jesus was not lost on the early Christians, as Justin Martyr argued. When we say, Jesus Christ, our teacher, was crucified and died, and rose again, and ascended into heaven, we propose nothing different from what you believe regarding those whom you consider sons of Zeus. There is, however, no belief in a general resurrection in ancient Greek religion, as the Greeks held that not even the gods were able to recreate flesh that had been lost to decay, fire, or consumption. The notion of a general resurrection of the dead was therefore apparently quite preposterous to the Greeks. This is made clear in Paul's Areopagus discourse. After having first told about the resurrection of Jesus, which makes the Athenians interested to hear more, Paul goes on, relating how this event relates to a general resurrection of the dead. Therefore, having overlooked the times of ignorance, God is now declaring to men that all everywhere should repent, because he has fixed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness through a man whom he has appointed, having furnished proof to all men by raising him from the dead. Now when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some began to sneer, but others said, "We shall hear you again concerning this." Abrahamic religions. Christianity. In Christianity, resurrection most critically concerns the resurrection of Jesus, but also includes the resurrection of Judgment Day, known as the resurrection of the dead by those Christians who subscribe to the Nicene Creed, as well as the resurrection miracles done by Jesus and the prophets of the Old Testament. Some churches distinguish between raising the dead and a resurrection. Resurrection of Jesus. Christians regard the resurrection of Jesus as the central doctrine in Christianity. Others take the incarnation of Jesus to be more central. However, it is the miracles, and particularly his resurrection, which provide validation of his incarnation. According to Paul, the entire Christian faith hinges upon the centrality of the resurrection of Jesus and the hope for a life after death. The Apostle Paul wrote in his first letter to the Corinthians, "If only for this life we have hope in Christ, we are to be pitied more than all men. But Christ has indeed been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep." Resurrection miracles. During the ministry of Jesus on earth, before his death, Jesus commissioned his 12 apostles to, among other things, raise the dead. In the New Testament, Jesus is said to have raised several persons from death. These resurrections included the daughter of Jairus shortly after death, a young man in the midst of his own funeral procession, and Lazarus, who had been buried for 4 days. According to the Gospel of Matthew, after Jesus' resurrection, many of those previously dead came out of the tombs and entered Jerusalem, where they appeared to many. Similar resurrections are credited to Christian apostles and saints. Peter allegedly raised a woman named Dorcas, and Paul the apostle revived a man named Eutychus who had fallen asleep and fell from a window to his death, according to the book of Acts. Preceding the apostolic era, many saints were said to resurrect the dead, as recorded in Orthodox Christian hagiographies. St. Columba supposedly raised a boy from from the dead in the land of pigs. Most Christians understand these miraculous resurrections to be of a different nature than the resurrection of Jesus and the future resurrection of the dead. The raising of Lazarus and others from the dead could also be called resuscitations or reanimations, since the life given to them is presumably temporary in nature. There is no suggestion in the Bible or hagiographic traditions that these people became truly immortal. In contrast, the resurrection of Jesus and the future resurrection of the dead will abolish death once and for all. Resurrection of the dead. Christianity started as a religious movement within first-century Judaism, and it retains what the New Testament itself claims was the Pharisaic belief in the afterlife and resurrection of the dead, whereas this belief was only one of many beliefs held about the world to come in Second Temple Judaism, and was notably rejected by both the Sadducees and, according to Josephus, the Pharisees. This belief became dominant within early Christianity, and already in the Gospels of Luke and John included an insistence on the resurrection of the flesh. This was later rejected by Gnostic teachings, which instead continued the Pauline insistence that flesh and bones had no place in heaven. Most modern Christian churches continue to uphold the belief that there will be a final resurrection of the dead and world to come, perhaps as prophesied by the Apostle Paul when he said, "He hath appointed a day, in the which he will judge the world, and there shall be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and unjust." Belief in the resurrection of the dead, and Jesus' role as judge, is codified in the Apostles' Creed, which is the fundamental creed of Christian baptismal faith. The Book of Revelation also makes many references about the day of judgment when the dead will be raised up. Difference from Platonic philosophy. In Platonic philosophy and other Greek philosophical thought, at death the soul was said to leave the inferior body behind. The idea that Jesus was resurrected spiritually rather than physically even gained popularity among some Christian teachers, whom the author of 1 John declared to be antichrists. Similar beliefs appeared in the early church as Gnosticism. However, in Luke chapter 24 verse 39, the resurrected Jesus expressly states, "Behold my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Handle me and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see I have." Islam belief in the day of resurrection, Yawm al-Qiyamah, is also crucial for Muslims. They believe the time of Qiyamah is preordained by God but unknown to man. The trials and tribulations preceding and during the Qiyamah are described in the Quran and the Hadith, and also in the commentaries of scholars. The Quran emphasizes bodily resurrection, a break from the pre-Islamic Arabian understanding of death. Judaism and Samaritanism. There are 3 explicit examples in the Hebrew Bible of people being resurrected from the dead. The prophet Elijah prays and God raises a young boy from death. Elisha raises the son of the Shunammite woman. This was the very same child whose birth he previously foretold. A dead man's body that was thrown into the dead Elisha's tomb is resurrected when the body touches Elisha's bones. During the period of the Second Temple, there developed a diversity of beliefs concerning the resurrection. The concept of resurrection of the physical body is found in 2 Maccabees, according to which it will happen through recreation of the flesh. Resurrection of the dead also appears in detail in the extra-canonical books of Enoch, in Apocalypse of Baruch, and 2 Esdras. According to the British scholar in ancient Judaism Philip R. Davies, there is little or no clear reference either to immortality or to resurrection from the dead in the Dead Sea Scrolls texts. Both Josephus and the New Testament record that the Sadducees did not believe in an afterlife, but the sources vary on the beliefs of the Pharisees. The New Testament claims that the Pharisees believed in the resurrection, but does not specify whether this included the flesh or not. According to Josephus, who himself was a Pharisee, the Pharisees held that only the soul was immortal and the souls of good people will be reincarnated and pass into other bodies, while the souls of the wicked will suffer eternal punishment. Paul, who also was a Pharisee, said that at the resurrection what is sown as a natural body is raised a spiritual body. Jubilee seems to refer to the resurrection of the soul only, or to a more general idea of an immortal soul. According to Herbert C. Brighto, writing in Reform Judaism's Hebrew Union College Annual, the family tomb is the central concept in understanding biblical views of the afterlife. Brighto states that it is not mere sentimental respect for the physical remains that is the motivation for the practice, but rather an assumed connection between proper sepulture and the condition of happiness of the deceased in the afterlife. According to Brighto, the early Israelites apparently believed that the graves of family, or tribe, united into one, and that this unified collectivity is to what the biblical Hebrew term Sheol refers, the common grave of humans. Although not well defined in the Tanakh, Sheol in this view was a subterranean underworld where the souls of the dead went after the body died. The Babylonians had a similar underworld called Aralu, and the Greeks had one known as Hades. For biblical references to Sheol, see Genesis chapter 42 verse 38, Isaiah chapter 14 verse 11, Psalm chapter 141 verse 7, Daniel chapter 12 verse 2, Proverbs chapter 7 verse 27, and Job chapter 10 verses 21, 22, and 17-16, among others. According to Brighto, other biblical names for Sheol were Abaddon, found in Psalm chapter 88 verse 11, Job chapter 28 verse 22, and Proverbs chapter 15 verse 11, or found in Isaiah chapter 14 verse 15, 24-22, Ezekiel chapter 26 verse 20, and Shakar, found in Isaiah chapter 38 verse 17, Ezekiel chapter 28 verse 8. Zen Buddhism. There are stories in Buddhism where the power of resurrection was allegedly demonstrated in China Zen tradition. One is the legend of Bodhidharma, the Indian master who brought the Ekayana school of India to China that subsequently became Chan Buddhism. The other is the passing of Chinese Chan master Puhua and is recounted in the record of Linji. Puhua was known for his unusual behavior and teaching style, so it is no wonder that he is associated with an event that breaks the usual prohibition on displaying such powers. Here is the account from Irmgard Schloegels, the Zen teaching of Rinzai. One day at the street market, Fuke was begging all and sundry to give him a robe. Everybody offered him one, but he did not want any of them. The master made the superior buy a coffin, and when Fuke returned, said to him, "There, I had this robe made for you." Fuke shouldered the coffin, and went back to the street market, calling loudly, "Rins, I had this robe made for me. I'm off to the east gate to enter transformation." The people of the market crowded after him, eager to look. Fuke said, "No, not today. Tomorrow I shall go to the south gate to enter transformation." And so for 3 days. Nobody believed it any longer. On the 4th day, and now without any spectators, Fuke went alone outside the city walls, and laid himself into the coffin. He asked a traveler who chanced by to nail down the lid. The news spread at once, and the people of the market rushed there. On opening the coffin, they found that the body had vanished, but from high up in the sky they heard the ring of his handbell. Technological resurrection. Cryonics is the low-temperature preservation of humans who cannot be sustained by contemporary medicine, with the hope that healing and resuscitation may be possible in the future. Cryonics procedures ideally begin within within minutes of cardiac arrest, and use cryoprotectants to prevent ice formation during cryopreservation. However, the idea of cryonics also includes preservation of people long after death because of the possibility that brain encoding memory structure and personality may still persist to be inferable in the future. Whether sufficient brain information still exists for cryonics to successfully preserve may be intrinsically unprovable by present knowledge. Therefore, most proponents of cryonics see it as an intervention with prospects for success that vary widely depending on circumstances. Russian cosmist Nikolai Fyodorovich Fyodorov advocated resurrection of the dead using scientific methods. Fedorov tried to plan specific actions for scientific research of the possibility of restoring life and making it infinite. His first project is connected with collecting and synthesizing decayed remains of dead based on knowledge and control over all atoms and molecules of the world. The second method described by Fedorov is genetic hereditary. The revival could be done successively in the ancestral line. Sons and daughters restore the fathers and mothers, they in turn restore the parents, and so on. This means restoring the ancestors using the hereditary information that they pass on to the children. Using this genetic method, it is only possible to create a genetic twin of the dead person. It is necessary to give back the revived person his old mind, his personality. Fedorov speculates about the idea of radial images that may contain the personalities of the people and survive after death. Nevertheless, Fedorov noted that even if a soul is destroyed after death, man will learn to restore it whole by mastering the forces of decay and fragmentation. In his 1994 book The Physics of Immortality, physicist Frank J. Tipler, an expert on the general theory of relativity, presented his omega point theory, which outlines how a resurrection of the dead could take place at the end of the cosmos. He posits that humans will evolve into robots which will turn the entire cosmos into a supercomputer which will, shortly before the Big Crunch, perform the resurrection within its cyberspace, reconstructing formerly dead humans as avatars within its metaverse. David Deutsch, British physicist and pioneer in the field of quantum computing, agrees with Tipler's omega point cosmology and the idea of resurrecting deceased people with the help of quantum computers, but he is critical of Tipler's theological views. Italian physicist and computer scientist Giulio Prisco presents the idea of quantum archaeology, reconstructing the life, thoughts, memories and feelings of any person in the past, up to any desired level of detail, and thus resurrecting the original person via copying to the future. In his book Mind Children, roboticist Hans Moravec proposed that a future supercomputer might be able to resurrect long-dead minds from the information that still survive. This information can be memories, film strips, medical records, DNA, Ray Kurzweil, American inventor and futurist, believes that when his concept of singularity comes to pass, it will be possible to resurrect the dead by digital recreation. In the science fiction novel The Light of Other Days, Sir Arthur Clarke and Stephen Baxter imagine a future civilization resurrecting the dead of past ages by reaching into the past, through micro-wormholes and with nano-robots to download full snapshots of brain states and memories. Both the Church of Perpetual Life and the terrorism movement consider themselves trans-religions and advocate for the use of technology to indefinitely extend the human lifespan. Zombies. A zombie can be either a fictional undead monster or a person in an entranced state believed to be controlled by a bok or a wizard. These latter are the original zombies occurring in the West African Vodun religion and its American offshoots Haitian Vodou and New Orleans Voodoo. Zombies became a popular device in modern horror fiction, largely because of the success of George A. Romero's 1968 film Night of the Living Dead, and they have appeared as plot devices in various books, films and in television shows. Zombie fiction is now a sizable subgenre of horror, usually describing a breakdown of civilization occurring when most of the population become flesh-eating zombies. A zombie apocalypse. The monsters are usually hungry for human flesh, often specifically brains. Sometimes they are victims of a fictional pandemic illness causing the dead to reanimate or the living to behave this way, but often no cause is given in the story. Disappearances. As knowledge of different religions has grown, so have claims of bodily disappearance of some religious and mythological figures. In ancient Greek religion, this was a way the gods made some physically immortal, including such figures as Cleitus, Ganymede, Menelaus, and Tithonus. After his death, Cycnus was changed into a swan and vanished. In his chapter on Romulus from Parallel Lives, Plutarch criticizes the continuous belief in such disappearances, referring to the allegedly miraculous disappearance of the historical figures Romulus, Cleomedes, Vestipalia, and Croesus. In ancient times, Greek and Roman pagan similarities were explained by the early Christian writers, such as Justin Martyr, as the work of demons, with the intention of leading Christians astray. In somewhat recent years it has been learned that Geza, the savior of Tibet, at the end, chants on a mountain top and his clothes fall empty to the ground. The body of the first guru of the Sikhs, Guru Nanak Dev, is said to have disappeared and flowers were left in place of his dead body. Lord Raglan's hero pattern lists many religious figures whose bodies disappear, or have more than one sepulchre. B. Traven, author of The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, wrote that the Inca Viracocha arrived at Cusco and the Pacific seacoast, where he walked across the water and vanished. It has been thought that teachings regarding the purity and incorruptibility of the hero's human body are linked to this phenomenon. Perhaps this is also to deter the practice of disturbing and collecting the hero's remains. They are safely protected if they have disappeared. The first such case mentioned in the Bible is that of Enoch. Enoch is said to have lived a life where he walked with God, after which he was not, for God took him. In Deuteronomy, Moses is secretly buried. Elijah vanishes in a whirlwind. 2 Kings. After hundreds of years, these two earlier biblical heroes suddenly reappear and are seen walking with Jesus, then again vanish. Mark, Matthew and Luke. The last time he is seen, Luke alone tells of Jesus leaving his disciples by ascending into the sky.